All right, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I am showing 6 o'clock. My name is Sue-Ann Hung, and I'm the president and CEO for the Center for Asian Pacific American Women, or CAPAW. I hope all of you had a safe holiday, and I am very excited about tonight's conversation about entrepreneurs starting, building, and maintaining your business in a virtual world in collaboration with OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates. Many entrepreneurial businesses have pivoted to meet new needs for goods, services, and out of crisis, especially many of us working from home. And the world, according to the World Economic Forum, more than 70% of startups have had to terminate full-time employee contracts since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. And also there's so much opportunity at the same time. So tonight, we're bringing the conversation to our broader community, and we have a fantastic group of diverse panelists joining us. So now I'd like you to introduce the president and CEO of the Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, or National ACE, our sponsor for tonight's event. Chilling Tong has extensive domestic and international experience in economic and business development with the focus on researching and enhancing the growth of small and minority business enterprises competing in the global market. Her career spans the private, nonprofit, and public sectors, so please join me in welcoming Chilling Tong.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. Thank you. Welcome all of you to the panel today. National ACE is a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to serve as a strong advocate of Asian American Pacific Islander business interest, affect positive change on all issues that enhance and advance the goals and aspiration of Asian American Pacific Islander business owners. For the past months, we have been working closely with all our national network of more than 60 affiliate chamber and partner around the country to ensure that Asian American Pacific Islander business community has the most accurate and up-to-date information about important resources that are available to our community during this global pandemic. And we're just so pleased to work with Center for Asian Pacific American Women and Asian Pacific American Advocates, and especially Sue-Ann Hung. Sue-Ann has been a fearless leader, and I really appreciate her positive thinking. Every time I'm with her, I feel I'm so inspired just by her action, by her commitment, and also by her dedication to our community. So we're just so pleased to work with her and also with OCA. Hopefully we'll be able to bring some good information for you. And among all the panelists and also moderator, I want to thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to be here. And especially our valuable partner, Susie, and she is the Executive Director of Pacific Islander Knowledge to Action Resources. And she is a great spokesperson for Pacific Islander community, and we learn so much from her. And also, I want to thank Rita, Fabian, and also Glenda. Thank you so much for being here with us, especially during the COVID. And we are I think people are so afraid. We don't know what will be the future. But we know when we get together, we talk with each other, we'll be able to inspire each other. I think that is this conference about. Not only to know how to deal with this in practical way, and also encourage each other. I still full the confidence and hope for this country. We know we will conquer this. But with all the community we work together, we'll be able to face the challenges. So I think as many of you know, as the beginning of the impact COVID-19, many Asian American Pacific Islanders businesses has a tremendous damage. So as a national ACE, we work very, very hard on the Capitol Hill. We met with, all the member of Congress, the administration, to advocate for small business. So therefore, we really also want to hear from your feedback, what we can do for you in Washington, D.C. And again, I want to thank all of you. This is not easy time, but I think you're willing to spend time with us. We really make sure you get some valuable information from all the panelists. And they are great achievers. They are the leaders in our community. And I have so much confidence on them. And also, I'm looking forward to hearing from them. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Chilling. I am really amazed at what National ACE has done, especially in the midst of COVID, and your leadership is amazing. So thank you so much. So now let me introduce you to our moderator for this evening, Glenda Beach, who is the Vice President of Agency Sales for State Farm Mutual Automobile Insurance Companies. As an executive, Glenda oversees the sales operation for Delaware, most of Maryland, Southern Pennsylvania, and portion of West Virginia. She began her State Farm career in 2002 as an agent in Kennett, Missouri, so she knows about being an entrepreneur. She received a Juris Doctorate degree from Brandeis School of Law, University of Louisville, and is a fellow for the Asian Pacific American Women's Leadership Institute, or APALI. State Farm has over 19,000 independent contractor agents and 84 million policies and accounts throughout the US. And so as part of that, she knows a thing or two about being an entrepreneur. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Glenda.
Thank you, Sue Ann. Thank you for that gracious introduction. But at the end of the day, I think Llc said it best, right? I just took, as a moderator, you'll see me taking notes along the way, but she said something that really caught my attention, and I want to kind of repeat it together before we get started. So when we get together, we inspire and encourage each other. And that is the goal of this call today, or this conversation. So thank you everyone for joining us. And again, special thanks to National ACE, CAPAW, and OCA for giving voice really to minority-owned businesses and entrepreneurs, and putting this webinar together and even recording it. My understanding is that right now it's streaming live, but it will be in a recorded version. So everyone on the call, we welcome you to the call. We are really excited to have you as our guest and interact with us. We have an opportunity to take your questions and we'll follow up accordingly. But think of this as, how can you take some of the information that's going to be shared with you today from our distinguished panelists to either help yourselves or help someone else. But it's the intent of this is to help each other. Okay. So with that, I wanted to start off to say, let's share some compelling statistics. And I think it's compelling because it hits close to home, whether it's you, it's a friend, a family member, or the communities that you have, friends. During small business owners during COVID-19 pandemic, there are over 1.1 million minority-owned businesses in the US. And those businesses employ 8.7 million workers annually with an economic output of $1 trillion. McKinsey & Company. Women own nearly 300,000 of the businesses, and women employ 2.4 million workers. Here's the additional compelling statistic. Before the pandemic, 31% of our AAPI small businesses were already at risk or in low financial health. Today, 66% of the minority-owned businesses are worried about having to permanently close. That's staggering. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so in our conversation, we're really going to take an opportunity to kind of segment into 3 sections. We're going to first start with our panelists, and I'll introduce them in just a second, to say, how do you get a business off the ground? What do you need to know? And then once you get it off the ground, how do you continue to grow it? And then finally, after you've grown it, how do you maintain it? How do you sustain it? And then we'll pause along the way for questions as appropriate, but we've also dedicated some time at the end to take your questions as well. And I encourage you to ask your questions. We do have someone monitoring that for us. All right. So with that, it is my privilege and honor to introduce to you the three panelists today. And we've asked them to kind of share their expertise and their experience in those three major categories: starting, growing, and maintaining. And so we're going to start with Susie Malohifao. Susie is the Executive Director of the Pacific Island Knowledge Group. Susie, why don't you do us the honor of telling us a little bit about yourself before we start into questions, and then I'll introduce the other two panelists as we bring on their topics. All right? Let's see, do we have Susie?
Hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Oh,
thank you.
sorry. I was saying thank you so much for the opportunity this evening, and thank you, Chilling, for your inspiring words, as Glenda mentioned. Glenda said, my name is Susie Felch from Alohipo. I was born in the Kingdom of Tonga, grew up in New Zealand, and moved to Utah about when I was 13 years old. I am a transracial adoptee, which means that I was adopted outside of my own ethnic culture. And so I was not able to learn my culture until I went to college. And I went to college in Northern California, where I was introduced to my culture. Currently, I am the Director of Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources here in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is a 5-year startup nonprofit. We have 3 areas that we work in, one of them being economic impact, and the program is the Pacific Island Business Alliance. We have a chapter in Salt Lake City, a chapter in Utah County, and we will be opening a chapter in Mesa, Arizona, and in San Diego, California. We work with micro-enterprisers. So our community is, relatively speaking, new to America, and comparatively speaking to other ethnic communities. So I want you to think back about when your ancestors came to this country, first generation, second generation, and how they survived and how they created businesses. Now they planted the seed that now we get to enjoy the shade that we sit under at this point. And so I think 2 things that come to mind are, it is very hard right now for our small businesses. And if you consider the age group of first generation came here, how do you pivot in a environment that's virtual? Do you have the tools? Do you have a computer? Do you understand how to turn on the computer? And so that is one of the issues that we've had to work with, is getting the resources and the tools for the businesses that are existing, and then teaching them how to pivot their businesses. Some don't want to do it. Some feel like maybe they're just can't. I've had business owners say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So I think that's one of the things that we've faced. Second is that it has been a catalyst for people to start businesses. People are losing their jobs. And so I'm seeing a lot of young people doing online businesses, getting started. We provide, and I'm just going to say, if you are in that place, look at your local community. Look for a community-based organization. Sometimes your larger chamber of commerces are not really equipped to work with micro-enterprisers. There is a difference between a micro-enterpriser and a small business. And so find that fit. If there are people that are on this call that want to get back to their community, please look for a community-based organization that works in business and economic development. And whether you have a computer to donate, whether you have time to mentor, to help, that would be another request that I would ask for you to do to help out. And those, I think, the other thing too that I think Chilling and hit on is there are people out there that want to help. We have to ask for it. And I mean, I just can't say that enough, that there are a ton of resources out there, but it is us that have to take that step. And then also that it is also us that have to reach out and say, I recognize that there's a problem and can I help? Buy small, buy from your ethnic businesses in your community. That is the way we're going to survive through this stronger. And so we here in Utah have had a big push in buying small businesses, making sure that our business directory is online, making sure that we are supporting in social media, supporting in the ways that some of the food businesses that have not translated and pivoted into a virtual, we try to do our best to promote through social media and every avenue that we can. So those are my two strategies. Reach out and donate if you can, time or tools or equipment, and reach out and ask for help.
Thank you, Susie. And so we had a great conversation last night. So thank you again for your time in preparing for this call. And part of that conversation was a question that I wanted to ask you about today in terms of technology and how it's playing in this space. What are you experiencing, and any advice that you could give to the audience tonight? We all have to recognize that technology is the key to being virtual sometimes. So what else should we be thinking about from a technological perspective?
You know, a lot of the businesses that we work with, to learn how to use a computer, it's going to take them months, right? And so we are asking for mentors. We are asking for family members to teach their parents, their grandparents, as much as they can. And to help out the businesses, we're asking college students to jump in and to mentor a business. And in just the social media part, it is not the time to be teaching when you're worried about struggling and profiting a business. And so we've gone to the theory of bringing in interns, bringing in college students, high school students that understand social media and can make flyers and help out in that way. This is the time that communities should bind together.
So Susie, we've got a question from our audience. Anne has asked us, she has an existing business and needs to rebuild an online business. Are there any resources to help her restructure and move to an online business?
Yeah, depending on the area that she's living in, I'm going to give you my information because I don't want anybody to drop through the cracks today. You should go back to your local city, county, Chamber of Commerce's. There are SCORE. SBA has some amazing resources there. You've got the Small Business Development Center as well, that have, usually they have people that speak different languages, but I'm gonna leave my information as well so that nobody drops through the cracks. If you're a micro enterpriser and you can't find that resource in your city, please reach out to me and I will help you find that resource along with Chilling. We will reach out to her and also help find you the resource that you need. But thank you for asking. That's what we need, people to reach out and ask for the help.
Outstanding. Susie and audience, we will have resources that will be available to you. We have team members on this call that'll drop the resources and drop contacts for our panelists like Susie, who has graciously offered to be a connection point, because that's what I've heard you say, right? Also in our conversation last night, and then I will get to Stephen's question, our conversation last night was, how do you start when you don't know where to go? And what I heard you say was local. Could you speak a little bit more about the grassroots conversation that you and I had last night as well?
Right. I love working in grassroots. And the reason that I like to work in grassroots is that we can move faster than large agencies can move and large government departments can move. When we see that there's a problem, we 3 or 4 issues and we're on it. We're already looking for resources because the next step, or I guess for chambers of commerce, they've got to get the data, they've got to get the revenue together, and then 3 years down the line, they're ready to go. And with grassroots, and why I'm suggesting if you're a micro enterprise business out there, find a community-based organization, find an ethnic community based organization. In our Pacific Island group, we have all different kinds of cultures that are in our business alliance. Anyone that needs help. And normally I would say that most grassroots groups are going to provide help for anybody that walks through their doors or picks up the phone and asks. United Way is also a very good resource in your city. Normally there's a United Way in every city and can point you in the right direction. But again, I'm gonna leave you my phone number. If you can't find one, always happy to help you do that.
Fantastic. And maybe one last question as we close the loop on this portion of the conversation. And this has come in from Stephen. And his question was, how can we invest in Pacific Island businesses? And are there advisory board opportunities? Great question.
Very great questions. Thank you, Stephen. There is not a group yet that you could actually go and invest in Pacific Island business. It is one business at a time. We have a Pacific Island business directory here in Utah with 200 Pacific Island businesses, and we have many more to go. In 2021, our strategic plan is to open that up to all other, because we've had many requests to be in our business directory. And I think that that's what we're going to really move towards in 2021, because like Stephen asked, if you want to invest, you wouldn't even know where to go because there's not a database out there. Again, for Pacific Islanders, and remember that we're the young ones here in this country, in comparatively speaking, to the Asian communities and all of the other ethnic communities, Hispanic, African American, is that we're 1, 2 generations, 3 generations in this country. And then the second question was advisory boards. I think on every level, national, county, city, there is a need for Pacific Island voices, and not just Pacific Island voices, but all ethnic communities. When I'm invited to go to, state meetings, I always look around the table and say, who's missing from here? And give them suggestions on whose voice is not being heard, and give them a place and some suggestions. Honestly, people just don't know. And usually when these meetings are put together, it's the most visible people in the community that are asked. And we are asked to be on every board once they find somebody. And so my job, I believe, in the work I do, is to say, I appreciate this opportunity. Could I find somebody else for you that I feel is capable, right? It's about mentorship. It's about apprenticeship. It is the fastest way to build capacity in communities, are those 2 ways. And so I try to emulate and be an example of the same thing that we ask our staff to be, and across the board at PICTAR.
Thank you, Susie. And Stephen, that was a fantastic question. So what I've heard you say, and maybe if we could tie a nice bow around it as much as we can, is the fact that, number one, we all have opportunities as citizens of the communities that we live in, right? To pay it forward, correct, or to be advocates, or to step up and raise our hands and say, how can I help? But those of us who are on the call who actually need the help, you've heard Susie talk about local communities, the United Way. I do know that almost every community has a United Way available to us. I wasn't aware that they had resources that you referenced tonight, Susie, so thank you for that. Local grassroots efforts, but more importantly, it's the recognition that there are resources out there that's most promising, right? That's step one. And what a great resource we have in you. Thank you so much for just offering your expertise, your help, and your dedication. I'm really honored to be as part of this conversation with you, Susie.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right. So our next portion of this conversation is someone who grew a business during this pandemic. As incredible as it sounds, it is really real. I'd like to introduce you to Rita Midgens. Rita is founder and president at Biz Guru LLC. Rita, what in the world were you thinking?
Well, that's a great question. I think a lot of my friends ask me that question. So listen, I think oftentimes we forget that when there are challenges, they are actually opportunities. So what I was thinking was actually that this was actually a very good time to launch the type of business that I launched, and I'll tell you a little bit about more about what that is. But we all talked about this need for sharing and connecting experiences, for mentoring, for being able to pay it forward to people who are younger in career. Well, obviously those kinds of needs are I would say hyper sensitive in this time and during this pandemic, right? So with people potentially losing their jobs, having to pivot to new careers, things like leadership coaching, things like helping organizations think about aspects of their culture that they need to address to make sure that everyone is included, and that issues with, whether it's people of color in a career advancement or any of those kinds of things are, again, brought to the surface, right? So if you think about from the timing perspective, ironically, while from a business, perspective, most people would have thought this is not a great time to start a business. When you think about the need, and this is where, I would say anyone thinking about starting a business, they should be really thoughtful about what need are they trying to fill. And I think when you could combine those things together, it makes, quite frankly, the timing doesn't matter. Because if there's a need in the market and you're able to fill that need in the market, that's really the recipe for success. And so I happen to be able to take advantage of the fact that all of these factors, right, in society and with people with their own careers were converging. And I have an offering that can help both individuals and organizations help navigate that. And so that was really the impetus for the timing.
So suspense, what need did you fill?
Well, for individuals, I'm an executive coach, so leadership and life coaching, mostly, particularly women of color, and I would say younger in career, both men and women, who are trying to figure out, what is their next move? What should their next step be? So, because of my breadth of experience, I have, close to 40 years of, leadership and business experience in a variety of industries, variety of different functions. I've seen a lot, right? So I can bring that expertise to bear, certainly from a coach perspective. So that's for I would say the individual. And for the organizations, there's a social reckoning going on right now in terms of, what's happening with, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's, again, issues of diversity and inclusion. And so organizations, particularly public companies, are much more today concerned about their brand and their reputation and their ability to attract and retain talent in that space. So I'm helping them with assessing their current state. I'm helping them with developing their strategies to address those things, and obviously helping them to engage with their diverse employee base.
So thank you for sharing that. So let's get to the nuts and bolts of how you started it, or how you started growing it. And maybe just a tag on, right? It's kind of a tag approach. Susie kind of took us through recognition that there are resources out there. You strike me as someone who is very aware of resources. And so how did you leverage those resources to get your business off the ground?
Yeah, listen, great question. So I would say, start with your personal network. So part of the way that I started to really grow my business was to make my network aware that I was actually, launching this business. So communicating that through the social platforms. I cannot stress enough the importance of the social networks and leveraging those social networks. So whether that be creating, a special page on LinkedIn, blogging, using, again, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or, Instagram, launching your own, again, page on those particular social platforms that have an enormous amount of diverse followings. If you tag your content, so creating great content and tagging your content in a relevant way, that begins to really expand the people that are interested in reading more about it or interested in connecting with you on that. So leveraging the personal network and using those social platforms are really key, right, to establishing your brand. And then I would say, creating really relevant content, practical, relevant content that individuals who you're trying to target are going to find helpful, because that's really, again, a great way to begin to build your reputation and to build your expertise with that community. So, blogging, developing a podcast, all those things are elements, right, that you can use in launching and in getting the word out. And then finally, I would say partnerships, right? So being able to leverage partnerships, whether it's with the Chamber of Commerce in your local markets. I love what we were talking about before about the importance of going to your local community and leveraging resources in that community. So there are tons of small business oriented organizations that help each other, right, build their businesses. So that would be another, I would say, key thing to focus on.
So any practical tips, Rita, on building? So completely get that you want to leverage the social network, but how do you start building one?
Yeah, so listen, I think part of it is, as I said, you need to launch. First of all, you should have a website. If you start a business, you should really think about creating a website. So when you begin to share content and begin to create your voice, right, whether it's sharing articles or sharing personal information about tips or things that you want to share with your audience, you want to be able to tag that and send them somewhere to find out more. Right. So you want to be able to have that website already ready to receive that information. And then, I would say, practically speaking, tracking the people who are following you and being able to, again, share regularly information, thought leadership. And it doesn't have to be things that you create yourself. It could be just relevant topics or articles or resources that those communities could benefit from. So the key really here is to be very visible in a social, way, to be very clear about what your message and target market is, making sure that you're, communicating to those audiences in a relevant way, and then having a way to loop back with those audiences. And you do that, again, through the social, whether it's tagging or looking for ways to capture their emails, for example, on your website so that you can continue to communicate and share information.
Fantastic. Susie, for a novice that is getting into this, that is launching their business, are there resources available that you could share in terms of the tracking, right? The tagging, I think the content, even content building. There's a lot of expertise and a lot of strategy I'm hearing that's going into every single detail of your business. And it seems like you've thought about it all, but how about resources for some of us who would like to get started?
Sure. Look, there are two sites, two organizations that have these kinds of services bundled into their website development. And I'll tell you, they're super easy to use. One is Wix, W-I-X, Wix.com, and the other is GoDaddy. So those are two very user-friendly, small business-oriented websites that also offer services around social media, around helping you with driving traffic to your site. And of course, all of those are, very much, I would say, fee-based, meaning that they're, you can sort of pay as you go. You don't have to buy the whole thing. You can just buy portions of those services. And then through those websites, you can also connect with experts in digital advertising or in social media if you wanted to do more sophisticated digital marketing, right? But the great thing is that if you know nothing, that these sites offer you a very easy, user-friendly way to develop your own site and to actually tap their resources on that site to build your business.
Great. So we've dropped those resources in for you, wix.com, W-I-X, wix.com, and then GoDaddy.com. Great resources. Before we wrap up this portion, let me just kind of summarize what I heard from you, Rita. A couple of things. One is you've got to be clear on the service or the need that you're trying to fill. And once you are clear there are resources available to you to help you bridge the gap, if you will, to establish a social network. Once you establish a social network, you need to really leverage it. And once you leverage it, you have to have the wherewithal to start tracking to see if what you're doing is working. And then finally, I'm assuming that you keep on going back and refining it over and over and over. And so the last question I have for you, Rita, is what trends have you seen? Is it, what's the horizon look like for entrepreneurs who are growing their business in just, no one knew 2020 was coming.
Right.
And like you opened up in terms of with challenges come opportunities. So how are those opportunities and how rich are they in environment and in just, everything that's going on? What's ahead of us?
Yeah, listen, I think I would say the virtual world is here to stay. I see with a lot of my clients just a greater degree of comfort in having meetings online, right? Just like we're doing today, we're having a virtual conference. So I think that trend is here to stay, and it's a good thing. It's a positive thing. It's going to allow us, candidly, to reach a much broader audience. It's going to allow us to do it in a much more cost-effective way. So I think the whole idea of continuing to leverage technology as a way to, increase our brand awareness, increase our networks, those things are going to continue to grow and become, candidly, much more important, right? And our ability, I would say, to deliver our services in a virtual way will become also more important, particularly with generations, the sort of millennial and Gen Z, generations where they're incredibly comfortable, right, in these kinds of platforms. And so, so I just think it's going to be, I would say, a lot broader audience opportunity for people to reach a much more diverse and much broader market.
Hey, so I just found out that we are doing great on time. And so since we are doing great on time, Rita, are you okay with a couple other additional questions?
Sure, absolutely.
You piqued my interest when you started talking about efficiencies, meeting up virtually. The cost, what about the startup cost, the maintenance cost?
Yeah.
Could you kind of expand on that as well?
Sure. So listen, I think, you should think about the cost in a couple of different buckets, right? So, obviously creating your own, sort of brand, if you will, brand identity. Some people take the time to do that. Some people don't. I think that, those are things that can come certainly later if you want, but I do think that you do need to create a system, whether it's, your logo or some way to, recognize who you are, right? A lot of people ask me about, how I came up with the name for my company, right? Biz Guru. Well, a lot of the names that I wanted were already taken, so I kept going down the list of other names. And the reason I landed finally on Biz Guru is because it kind of says a little bit about me and about what I do, right? So I'm an expert guru, right? That's typically what the word means. And I help businesses, right, with issues that are core to what they do. So the Biz Guru thing just, kind of worked. And so once you develop that brand, I would say the cost is, all right, now, how do you incorporate that into things like a website? So you should think about a couple $1,000s, call it, $2,500, $3,000 to build a website. If you wanted to hire somebody to build you a simple website. You could do it yourself, by the way, on Wix or on GoDaddy. You don't have to hire an external person to do that. And the cost for that is obviously going to be a lot less because you're using existing frameworks that they've already got on their platform. I would say depending on how sophisticated, how many services you want to quote unquote include in your website, that's going to dictate obviously a little bit of the cost, but it's not as expensive as most people might think. Where it starts to get to be more expensive is when you start to think about how do you drive traffic to your site, right? So SEO, like search engine optimization, there you have to be thinking about, well, what's the keywords that I want to buy, that I want people to search on, to find me on Google, for example. So, listing your business on Google is another cost, right? So you want to be able to be listed so that people find you when they search for you. If you're not a LinkedIn premium member, you want to upgrade your membership to a premium membership so that you can send in mail. So little things like that. So when obviously it's all based on, I would say, how quickly you want to grow and how broadly. And so those things I think are going to dictate some of the costs.
Yeah. I think we're going to have time. And so Susie, I just want to put you on notice and maybe Chiling as well in terms of, I can imagine that the audience that's sitting here and listening to us, are there funding available? Are there funding sources available to get a business off of the ground? So I want to circle back to you, but before I do, I want to close the loop here with you, Rita. We have a question from Donna Cole. Hi, Donna. Thank you so much for your question. I think Donna's question is also a great one in terms of, there is the accounting side, there is the legal side. There's a lot of components to starting up a business in addition to naming conventions. And once you get it started, of course, growing it. But could you maybe expand on Donna's question in terms of business formation, LLC versus LLP, accounting?
Absolutely. So yes, you could certainly go to a small business attorney, tax attorney, to help you think through the right structure for you, right? Whether it should be a partnership, an LLC, et cetera. I actually I used LegalZoom to first start up my, just to do a search on the name, to get my EIN number, my tax ID number. And then I decided, because I didn't plan on hiring employees anytime soon, I decided that an LLC, sole proprietorship, was the best for me because I'm an independent consultant, right? So from a financial perspective, I talked to my tax advisor, he agreed. So that was sort of the way that I did that. There's no doubt that applying for a DUNS number, making sure that you're on the D&B, site, the Dun & Bradstreet site. If you can, I would strongly suggest, if you're going to do any work with the government, to register your company on the Systems for Award Management, sam.gov. That's, again, another great way to expand your potential market opportunity, because if you're a government entity, you cannot do business with anyone that is not registered on sam.gov. So, again, there's a small cost, a small fee to get registered on that site, but I think it's worth it because it really does expand your potential, client opportunity.
Okay, thank you. That's another great tidbit that has come out of this conversation, right? So thank you so much, Rita. And I may reserve the right to circle back with you as well, but I'll give you a heads up, just like I did with Susie, okay? Okay, so I am excited to bring on our next panelist. His name is Fabian D Rosario. And Fabian is the CEO of Global Connect Consulting and Training. And Fabian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into Q&A as well.
I'll be glad to. Thank you, Glenda. And it's such a pleasure to be in this session with some former friends, some current friends I've known for quite a while, and some new friends as well. And thank you all for calling in or listening to the recording. A little bit about me. I'm originally from the country of Malaysia. I came to the US some 30 years ago as an international student by way of Edinburgh, Scotland, where I spent some time in boarding school. I spent the first after graduating from college, I spent about 18 years in 3 different jobs, a couple of jobs at 2 different universities in administrative roles, and then moved to Atlanta, where I am calling you from. I've been here for 22 years now, and the first 8 years was working for a nonprofit. 15 years ago, I left full-time employment to do what many of you are thinking about, or some of you are already doing. And Rita, welcome to the world of consulting. Looking forward to maybe an opportunity to partner with you on some projects in the future. What Rita explained is what I do now. So over the past 15 years, I mostly do training and development. I do some consulting, some coaching, but mostly I'm a platform guy. And so I would travel fairly extensively, averaging about 100 workshops a year. Of course, since COVID started, it was a dry spell for 2 months. Classes were canceled, either that or postponed. And then April, suddenly, as these companies started to realize that they need to do something with their talent who are stuck at home and working from home, the floodgates just opened up. And this webinar right here, I do count this as one of my webinars. This is webinar number 131. So it's been busy. It's been insightful. I've worked with about 200 organizations over the course of these 15 years, and most of them are Fortune 250 companies.
Thank you. Wow, is all I can say in terms of the adaptation of quickly going from one scenario to the next. I'd like to kind of stay there if you wouldn't mind.
Certainly.
How did you pivot? I'm assuming that part of your consultation work was face-to-face or office visits or site visits or group visits. And now it is 100% virtual?
It is 100% virtual. I even had a client that insisted on a, this was scheduled months ago, and they insisted on doing it in person. And it's actually a military branch. And a few weeks before the session, I actually decided that I would refuse to work because the situation was just, all the research, I even provided quotes of data, published by the state. And within the day, they decided that it would be a virtual program. And interestingly enough, a third of the people that these were leaders in the organization, they had called from what appeared to be their home. The rest of them were in uniform, obviously in the office and all that. So that's the only situation that I came about where the client insisted for it to be in person, but the rest of them have all pivoted. And these are big companies, with a global presence, all the way to small organizations of 400 people. So I do feel very blessed. I have to tell you that when COVID hit and these things were starting to get serious, where the cancellations were happening and things were being postponed, well, obviously the immediate thought to my mind is, I can do a webinar. I've done some webinars over the past 14 years, maybe I've done 10, not a lot. Like I said, I pretty much travel. And what did I do first? Was it Susie that talked about the power of partnerships and relationships? Didn't you talk about that, Susie? That's what I did. I immediately tapped into the relationships and partnerships that I have. Some of the work that I have are not directly through, they're through a third party, a friend of mine. In the past, I used to get work from Korn Ferry. So I'm used to getting work from many different directions, not necessarily my direct clients, of which I do have some. And so I reached out to some of these partners, and in some cases, maybe even a couple of clients, and just started asking, hey, what are we going to do? Let's should I buy a Zoom account? I didn't have a Zoom account. I'm a cheapskate. I'm a small business. All right. I'm not going to spend any money that I don't need to. But things started getting real, and the two things. Why don't I just drive two key points home, and then people can ask more questions about it, because you had me think about that last night when we talked. What are the two things that is helping me, based on my assessment, remain successful in these difficult times? One is my being in touch, and being in touch means a lot of things as I speak to it. Number one, being able to read the environment and see what's going on. And so whether that is very quickly responding to the fact that I had to start seeking solutions to start staying busy, because after I tidied up this bookshelf in 3 weeks and threw out 14 boxes, 30-pound boxes of paper and handouts that were in binders, I ran out of projects to do at home. And so I needed to get some work, right? And so I had to pivot and very quickly respond to what was happening in the environment. Number two, leveraging technology. Rita has mentioned this a lot, and I cannot emphasize enough to you entrepreneurs, and many of you are probably working on this. Really focus on that, my friends. That older laptop, the deals are still there. Get a new one. In my work, I cannot fail to not be able to deliver a session like this when it's promised, because they have scheduled 25, 30 leaders from all over the place. That is, reliability is absolutely critical. And so I upgraded all my technology, and I can get into details if people want to. I can be very, very specific on that. So these are the two areas that I focused on in pivoting on this business.
Thank you. I would like to get into that because we do have some time, but before we do, let's go back to, first of all, thank you for being real. And, just sharing that you were worried.
Oh, yeah.
I think we started this call that there are millions of people that are worried. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to take a minute to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. And some of them are still in the worry stage. They have not been able to fully recover or even partially recover. And I acknowledge that.
Yes. And so thank you again for just your authenticity. All three panelists, actually, I think we do have to acknowledge that. But then we've got to figure out a way to move forward, right? Which is what this conversation is about tonight. And so as you've moved forward, I want to ask you in terms of how do you continue to provide value in a virtual environment? And you can do it with your current setting, or you can do it more broadly. I mean, you're a consultant, so as a moderator, I guess I'm going to take the liberty to say you can be in your shoes or someone else's. But how do you continue to provide value in this virtual environment?
I will answer from the context of my business, which I also think has application to other businesses, most other businesses. Two words come to mind: customize and impact. Let me explain. This situation has never happened before to me, and I'm sure to people around the world. And we all need to find the strength and the resilience, and resilience is a popular word these days, to pick up and reinvent. Now, I need to be humble to say that I'm not sure if I've had to do a tremendous amount of reinventing, but I certainly have had to pivot to be able to deliver my value differently. Now, fortunately, by the nature of the work that I do, I don't have a lot of fixed costs. I don't have a restaurant that I'm paying rent on that I have to give up of. In my, I mean, that's rough, right? But we've got to find and muster the courage to pick up, and if there's not a whole lot of pieces left, to completely rebuild. So in my small way, I rebuilt And as I regained my connection with my current clients, and as a result of some of the things that even Rita talked about, that has also brought some new work for me as well. So I will say that things have really picked up, especially with the George Floyd incident, killing, and all of these things that are happening have created some new opportunities for me, some of which, frankly, is not in my wheelhouse. But I had the trust of my current clients, and so as much as I don't like to spend too much time customizing my work, guess what? I've got the extra time because I'm not having to drive to the airport and pick up a plane. So a gig is no longer a 24-hour commitment. A gig is whatever they schedule me for. So I've got the extra time to say, you know what? I can do that. Or let me look at that. And Google is my friend. It truly is. You know how people now are cooking more at home, and they're going to YouTube and being like master chefs? I think all of us can create new masteries if you decide on the focus that Rita talked about earlier on. And with that focus, you can create the mastery. So customize. Second, impact. What I care about the most in the work that I do is making sure that I'm clear-minded on what the customer needs, what the client needs, and to make sure I deliver on the impact and make sure I've got the feedback loop to make sure that I delivered on the impact. Now, the reason I said that some of my insights perhaps is extendable to other businesses is because the businesses that I see successful in these very difficult times, they care about the outcomes of their services that they provide. I think about our favorite Thai restaurant that, you know, we decided 2 months ago we're going to start going out to restaurants again. Other than that, we pretty much were sheltered at home. And so we went to Sri Thai. So there's any Atlanta folks, yeah, go ahead and make a note of that one, in Duluth. Our favorite restaurant. And that was actually the first restaurant we decided to go eat at, because it was actually, we were invited by another couple to go do. So we went. We walked in and they took our temperature. They had to sanitize our hands. Everything was as hygienic. And we've been to other restaurants ever since then, about 8 total now. We've been to Sri Thai back 3 times out of the 8. And reason why we're going back to Sri Thai more often is because they are more diligent about it. They care about the impact. You know, the knowledge of the cautions that people need to take is not hidden information. Everybody knows this. So the difference between the restaurant that responds to the current crises and the one that, you know, does a so-so job is a matter of will and choice. And so my ask of me as an entrepreneur, and my invitation for the entrepreneurs that are listening in, is that be in touch. Remember my first comment? Be in touch. And it is really easy to do so if you've got a cell phone. Look up the articles, see what people are talking about, see what people are doing, see which businesses are being successful. You know, come on programs like this, get some ideas that might trigger something relevant in your space, and then make the choice to do something about it and do it well.
Any advice on being in touch as far as resources or links that you go to? And you referenced your cell phone. My gosh, there are hundreds of thousands. I mean, Google listens to us, I feel like, every day. And so it depends on what you talk about, right? But how do you be intentional about being in touch? Did you have any advice there?
There is not a handful of sources that I go to, you know, other than Google. But you just prompted me to remember that during this period of no work, about 2 months or so, I signed up for as many webinars as I could. And everybody, did you notice that starting in about March, they were starting to pick up these webinars, and suddenly it just exploded. Everybody's doing a webinar. Did you notice that? I signed up for as many of them. And so as I was shelving books, as I was, answering email, I've got a TV right here in my office. And so sometimes I will just shove the webinar over to the TV while I'm working on my on my laptop and this extra screen. By the way, speaking of technology, make sure you get the right devices, okay? And I would just watch how people do their webinars, and I kind of pick up the do's and the don'ts and all that. And to the degree that that I even was asked to do a seminar, a pro bono seminar on visual presence and a virtual presence. And that link for that YouTube video is available on YouTube for free, obviously. That link is actually in the resource guide. And so my invitation for any of you, if your business relies on you showing up visually and speaking and communicating and sharing information online, just like what we're doing, watch that. And you know how I learned all the stuff to talk about that? Yeah, partly from my work experience doing live training, but my wife and I started scouring the YouTube and looking at articles and started to pick together a few things. And then I collapsed them into a model that you're going to see on that webinar. It's a 1-hour webinar hosted by SACE, the Society for Aging Scientists and Engineers. I have some friends there and they said, hey, would you do a free webinar? Since you do webinars now professionally. I'm like, sure, I'll be happy to. I am an expert at it. And then I very quickly went to Google. And then I became an expert.
Well,
that's how it's done.
So Susie, Rita, and I, Sue Ann, and Chalon, we can give you a testimonial right now and just an in-person Google review, if you will, your ability to help us improve our virtual presence, because as we were getting ready for this webinar, all of us joined in a little early, and he was like, hey, make sure that you have better light in front and not in the back. Make sure that your camera is at eye level. I mean, there are little tips like that, but I have to tell you, I wanted to bring some levity to the conversation, but the seriousness of it is this. Your professional brand is now being broadcasted much more so than it ever has been. And it is those little things that make a difference. It is taking the distractions away. Right? Making sure that people can still see you eye to eye, because I still feel like I can see you and I can, but the connection is real.
Yep.
And the pandemic, I think, has just expedited some of the things that we've been seeing trending this way anyway. It's just expedited it.
Yes.
And so here are some of my key takeaways from my conversation with you today, Fabian, is that, and I love that, you truly are a virtual consultant, because you're like 2 and you held up 2. 2 things to know. One is being in touch, right? Making sure that you are staying up to date. My interpretation of that is staying up to date with relevant information that pertains to the business and the services that you want to provide.
Yes.
And then secondly, leveraging technology.
Oh,
and
yes.
I want to pause there because Susie had a question in terms of differentiating leveraging technology. I don't know if you had a chance to see that, but she says, are you referring to social media to market your business, or are there other platforms that you would use?
All right, I'm just going to toss a barrage of things to think about. So devices is a big deal. And in fact, once I'm done talking, I'm going to copy and paste a link of a McKinsey article that I just found about 20 minutes before our session here. And it talks about, it's an analysis of 2,000 tasks, 800 jobs in 9 countries in terms of the future of work. And this article, this survey had determined that they estimate that about when this pandemic is done, they predict that 20% of the workforce, of the world workforce, is able to and will continue to do the same level of work as they would in the office at home. Which translates to comparing to prior to pandemic, okay, the past normal before this craziness started, that they estimate that quadruple the number of people are going to be working from home. Does not that inform entrepreneurs for new opportunities? Right? And this article has a chart that I'm looking at here of the types of activities with the highest potential for remote work. They are updating knowledge and learning type work, interacting with computers, thinking creatively, communicating and guiding colleagues. You can look at the article, and I'm gonna post it on chat here in just a moment. The point is this: being able to operate remotely and run a business will require technology. So get the right devices. You know, that laptop that is a little bit older, update it. My work is so dependent on it. I've got 2 laptops. So if one fails, the other is going to work. I upgraded to gig speed in terms of my internet access. And I make sure that my upload speeds are important as well, because, you know, when you get internet, you got to check your download speeds, you know, to download videos. But check it out. I'm uploading my video to you now. So I need to make sure my upload speeds are also good. And then I make sure I hardwire from my router to my laptop so that I have the best speed, because Wi-Fi versus a wired, it can almost be 3 to 4 times the difference in terms of speed. Now, I didn't know all this tech stuff. How did I figure it out? 2 ways. Google, did I mention Google? Google, and emailing my friends. The ones that are, you know, like the computer nerds. Oh, they're your best friends during COVID time, right? And so they recommended what modem to buy. And so I've got all my new stuff. And then guess what I'm doing with my old laptop? Well, before I bought the new laptop, now I have the 2 good laptops with me. But before that, my old retired laptop, I would have it on the side so that I can digitally reference stuff while I'm engaging with my primary laptop. And then buying a better microphone, buying an extra light, you know, which is $27, which I can then just take the little clipper out and go do Zoom calls with my family, right? There's just so many, and of course you've got to have the extra monitor. So these are just some examples of hardware stuff. And yes, it does cost some dollars, but undeniably, at least for me, it has given me the confidence and the reliability that my clients expect, that gives me the return business. Is that worth money in the bank? Yes, it does. By the way, if my internet fails, I have 2 more backups that I want to tell you about. Costco had on sale for $99 a universal power backup. So I have that. And all my modems, my router is connected to that. So if and that has happened where the entire power in the house goes off, my backup battery will run my laptop and it will run my modem and my router. And if the internet fails, and by the way, I had a tree cut down and they were grinding the stump and they cut the Xfinity line, I switched to my 5G service and I was able to continue with my work. I wasn't doing a webinar, but I had to do emails and all that. It never interrupted my service. So pay attention to what it takes for you to operate efficiently online.
Great advice with such passion as well. I love it so much. I can see Susie smiling as well, and Rita. So hey, Donna Cole, Sue Ann, I think Donna, I don't know, this advice here, I could see, Donna, you being tapped if you haven't already for a future session. But Donna, I know that you are also a huge advocate for the AAPI community. So thank you for your tip here. And Donna, for those of you who can't see that, she has shared that all departments of the federal government have webinars to advise opportunities for companies of what they are buying in terms of products and services if you want to do a B2B business. So kind of, going full circle to what Chalong started with. When we get together and we have a conversation to inspire and encourage each other, magic really happens. And so because we have some time, I'm not going to drag it out, but I would like to invite both Susie and Rita and Fabian now to let's just bring you all back together and ask you maybe one or two last questions and give you an opportunity to respond. The first question is, as you've had an opportunity to listen to each other, right? We did have a prep session, everyone, but we really didn't. This was authentic conversation. It wasn't scripted at all. It was a conversation where each of the panelists knew where I wanted to take the conversation in terms of questions, but we took it in different directions even tonight because it was the right thing to do. So with that, though, I wanted to circle back because we've all had a chance to kind of listen to each other and, more importantly, learn from each other. Susie, Rita, Fabian, based on what you've heard, based on the questions and the comments, is there anything left that you would like to say, hey, I forgot to tell you about this, and I'd like to take an opportunity to do so before we close out? So that would be my first question. And then we'll start closing out. So audience, if you have questions, now's the time to go ahead and put it in the IM and we'll address them as needed. But Susie, any last thoughts of advice, even from a funding perspective? I think I alluded to that. Don't think I'm letting you off the hook. I'm not, but that may be a follow-up. Susie.
Yeah, thank you so much. I did want to say that I recognize that in Fabian's work and both Rita's work is that we all, there's commonalities. It's just in what the degrees are. So Rita was talking about going and getting government contracts, but as a micro enterprisers, maybe we start off with companies that provide diversity supply opportunities, right? And build and take those steps until you can build capacity. You've got all of your counting in place, and give yourself the leeway to take small steps to get to those big government contracts, right? I mean, I found it very interesting that there's some commonalities, regardless of where we are, whether at micro enterprising or at a larger company revenue, it's still the same. And I found that interesting. So, and the second thing about funding, I was going to say that we are a Kiva trustee. The Kiva Loan is $15,000. It is good anywhere in the United States and in the territories. 0% interest for businesses. It has a very different model, unlike microlending. And here in Utah, we have microlending starting at $5,000 and up. And so in your city, go to your community foundation. They should have, that's a good place for small businesses to start. The other idea that came to mind was, again, finding out who your companies that provide diversity supplier chains. Sign up with them, right? Sign up with your cities that provide. I have our cities come to me a lot and say it's a very much easier process than going the SBA route. A lot of people come and say they want to be an 8A. Well, it takes 2 years in being in business first before you become an 8A certified with SBA. But we are about mentoring people and walking with people to that point so that they can find their higher ground. So I did want to say that the Kiva Loan, you can speak to us. You can find a Kiva trustee in your town. $15,000, 0 interest. You don't start paying the loan back for 6 months, and you've got 3 years to pay it back. And there is not a credit check. It is a friend and family check. It is done through PayPal. You have to have usually 10 friends or family or clients lend you $20. And so instead of a credit check, it's more of a do we believe in you check. And so that's a great source of revenue. But anyone that in cities out there, go to your community foundation. They usually have money available for micro lenders and small businesses. CDFIs, which are, I know here in Utah, they are savings programs where for a business that will match you 3 times, 1 to 3, 1 to 5. And that can be used for a startup business, can help you with education or to buy a home. Right? So there are many avenues and resources out there. Again, it's finding them. And so ask people in your network. You have my information as well. But that would be my 2 things that I would share.
Well, if I'd known that, I would have put you on notice for a lot other thing, a lot of other things at the beginning of this conversation. Susie, that was great. Great information. Thank you. And so encouraging that there are some funding resources out there for those attending the call and everyone attending the call. I mean, lucky for us, it's recorded. And so if you didn't catch it the first time, we'll make this available to you so that you can pass it along to a family or a friend for this valuable information. Rita, any last words of wisdom from you?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things that I thought about as really incredibly rich conversation from everybody. I think this has been an incredibly valuable session. I would say, think about what is unique about your offering. Like really give that some thought. And what's your, what is your value proposition at the end of the day? Because, there's a lot of competition out there, right? And you need to be clear about what is it that you bring to the table that is different from everyone else, right? So I think two things that I would say are important is, not just thinking about what's unique about you and your offering, but also doing some homework around who's your competition, right? Because that's going to help you better position your offering. And then, connect with be authentic, right? Connect your story, your personal story to your business. I think in the end, people buy from people. And so being able to be authentic and connecting that to your personal story, sort of the why behind your purpose, I think is really important as well.
Rita, someone very smart told me this a long time ago, and it saddens me that I can't properly credit that person, but the message is still just as strong. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, love that.
I think is what you just shared with us. So thank you so much. And then one last, Fabian, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to close the loop. And then after that, everyone, I'm going to turn it over to Sue Ann. Fabian, any last words of wisdom for people attending tonight? Whoops, we can't hear you.
Hey, there's the mute button. What I was saying was not necessarily wise, but I want to build on this theme of relationships. I remember a time when, I probably typify the Asian. I'm the only child, maybe a little stubborn. And I remember a time where asking for help from somebody, I regarded that as a sign of weakness. So, whether there's a cultural thing or whatever, but I'm speaking probably to my community that I have some cultural connections with. And so I would like to reinforce what my two other esteemed colleagues have shared. And Glenda, you've done such an amazing job summarizing stuff. In fact, I need to hear this recording again so I can remember what in the world did I say, because Glenda summarized it. The power of asking for help. And let me give you something that I share oftentimes when I do my work, and I'll tell you who I do the work with. Is with Procter & Gamble. I have that's my longest relationship that I have, and over the course of these past 15 years, I do a new hire onboarding program with a variety of different career accelerators, and these are super smart people. Some of them with bachelor's and master's degrees if they're lab techs and stuff, or researchers, and then of course there are the PhDs and the postdocs, and this is both in the U.S. and in all of Asia. And they're not all Asian either. I work with the African-American group, the Latino group. And there is an aspect of what I have been inculcated. I've become proctorized to a certain degree. I hope my Colgate and Kimberly-Clark clients are not listening to this one, but there are, P&G and General Electric are probably the two organizations that I have a chance to work with that has probably produced more CEOs of other organizations than I know of. And why? Because they are very they have strong cultures that are very in touch with their consumers and the marketplace globally. And so, for example, Procter & Gamble, 190 years old, you know, in I think number 18 in the Fortune 500, 100 and I'm not sure where it is now, but it used to be about 125,000 employees worldwide. And after interacting with, I think, thousands of individuals and probably hundreds of band 5s and up who are director levels and up, all the way to the C levels, there is this saying that I use a lot, that I've kind of picked up to some degree. I'm not sure it was created by P&G, but this is the sense that I think fuels the greatness of that company and the people that they produce. Well, like I said, they produce some incredible C-level people throughout the world. And this one learning, I think, speaks to what we've been hearing from my esteemed colleagues on the call today. And I invite all of you as entrepreneurs to truly understand the greatness behind this. And this is it. No one person can be fully successful alone. Think about that. Think about the great people that you know of or that you read about. Well, frankly, think about yourself. And I would dare say that for many of you, if not each and every one of you, you are in a better place today because somebody lifted you up. Whether they provided information that was a game changer in how you choose to focus on the business that, you know, Rita said, you got to have focus, or somebody who gave you information about a source of funding, like on the call today. You never know what relationship is going to produce some amazing, I use the word game changing. Once again, that's from A.G. Lafley's book, former CEO of P&G. No one person can truly be fully successful alone. So start figuring out who you're going to turn to partner with, to ask for help, ask for information. And I hope that you reciprocate as well, because that is what is going to truly, you know, it's not so, yes, the vaccine will get us out of this funk, but I tell you what, it's the power of people that will win in every case. And I invite you to do that. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Fabian. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Rita. If you are not inspired by this conversation, I don't know what else it would take, to be honest with you. And you've said some powerful things, so I will not dare to summarize or reiterate that, but I would dare to say this. Tonight, we've heard from 3 distinguished panelists who've taken the time out of their calendar to authentically share their story as well as their knowledge, right? I heard be clear with your purpose. I heard there are resources available, but I also heard loud and clear is that be a resource as well. We all have it within us to be a resource for each other in times of need. And I would argue that right now, there's a lot of people in need, family, friends, communities. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this session with thanks to OCA National, thanks to CAPAW, thanks to ACE and Llc. Thank you, Sue Ann, for your leadership. And basically, Sue Ann brought this panel together, everyone. And so without you, Sue Ann, we wouldn't be having this conversation because you brought us all together, and everyone else that has made this possible. Thank you, everyone. Resources will be made available to you. This is also recorded. Jay, I'm going to turn it over to you to close this out. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Glenda. And I want to just, again, thank all the panelists. Thank you to Glenda. And thank the audience for just joining us in this conversation tonight. And again, yeah, thanks to National ACE, thanks to Chilling. And we are so grateful to CAPAW for the partnership in hosting these events. This is actually our 4th event in a series for API women, set to empower the API community. And yeah, as Glenda mentioned, the session is recorded and can be found on any of the 3 Facebook pages, on the National ACE Facebook page, OCA and CAPAW page. And just stay tuned for our events. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your nights and stay warm and stay very safe. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.